How have recent historical events affected the course of research in organizational psychology? Give an example of an event and the resulting outcome. For most of the people of my generation, born in the 80s, a major factor is September 11th. A lot of things changed in my life and as I've learned in psychology, and specifically in industrial organizational psychology. September 11th made it to where companies not only had to think about the financial side of things, but if they weren't already thinking about emergency preparedness, then that was really something that was on their mind after what took place. In my professional life, I've went through preparedness classes. Before that, when I was in school, when I was in high school, this is in 2001, so I was a sophomore, and we would normally have tornado drills, fire drills, but after those events, we started doing bomb threat drills. In my professional life, especially when you're first starting out in a company, you're going to go through some sort of protocols, the regular tornado fire drills, but now they introduced, of course, the bomb threats, the active shooters, the chemical, how to deal with chemicals or chemical threats. It's just a big book of protocols now on what to do if you're over people, how to interact with patients, what to do with them. So that was a big deal. Companies now are clearly trying to make the workplace safer. I also see this as a sort of financial protection too. Everybody has to have insurance, and typically the insurance companies are going to require that the companies have some sort of emergency preparedness, and sometimes these insurance companies provide plans, and they just have to implement them at the company. September 11th also introduced a lot of other problems, financial instability. I remember how the markets shifted around September 11th, and then from there we had a couple of wars, and things just weren't the same. We had the housing bubble. It seemed that all sorts of things happened in the small amount of time leading up to 2007, 2008, when we had the big recession that lasted for a long time. High unemployment levels, all within this small amount of time, talking 5-10 years. And companies started having to focus on how do they deal with employees who are worried about financial instability. How do the companies themselves deal with financial instability? What to do about an aging population? When you have an aging workforce, all of a sudden you have to worry about the things that they worry about. So companies started taking into consideration better retirement packages, all sorts of things. Industrial organizational psychology began to focus more on the research of this, what to do, or how to react to these new scenarios. Organizational psychology began to revisit the impact of unemployment, which was staggeringly high at the time. This also fashioned a revival of research in job security and the study of its effects. This was an ongoing, and still is ongoing. It's something in this global economy now. It's not just about the United States or any individual company. If recessions happen, then it affects pretty much every country, and then that's what industrial organizational psychologists have to deal with. Describe the socialization process for graduate students in your program. Is the program successful in socializing newcomers and creating job embeddedness? When I first started at Liberty back in 2014, I actively sought for information on how to do things and using this new technology, which is Blackboard. If I hadn't done that, I would not be able to do anything. And Liberty was keen on providing this information easily to newcomers. They had step-by-step procedures, instructions, and if they changed anything, they updated this to reflect that. And this is even in classes. I mean, in a class, I might have to do something that I've done maybe 20 or 30 times before, but maybe Liberty's changed something. I know Blackboard has had updates over time that change stuff, and sometimes they've streamlined things, other times they've made things a little bit more confusing, but then you learn how to do it and it's easy. But Liberty has always been able to find a way to get this information to its students, which is good for socialization. Next, after that, I began to test and research how best to do my assignments. I mean, what did my teachers want? This is kind of like a job environment. What do my bosses want? What do they expect of me? How am I graded? How am I supposed to do my work? What are my assignments supposed to look like? I began to research this. I began to test the waters. I would do my reports a certain way, and they come back and they'd be graded, and maybe I didn't get the grade that I wanted on it, and so I would actively change to fit what the instructor needed. And I've had different instructors who wanted different things. I just had to learn what they needed. Now, overall, the Liberty process of doing things, it's mostly been the same. Most instructors are going to want to grade similarly, and I think Liberty has instituted that with its instructors, I'm sure. Another important factor is how to properly communicate professionally in a digital world. This is something I hadn't done before. I'm not big on using things like Facebook or Twitter or any of the other social media, and those aren't professional anyway. But this is different. So if I had been big on using those, this might be difficult for me because I would actually have to think out how to do things properly, how to communicate properly in a professional manner, how to reach out to others, how to reach out to my other classmates. I mean, this is a different environment. Has Liberty been successful? I see it in two different lights, yes and no. This is a digital world. It's difficult for people to communicate with each other in a digital world, especially when all this depends on how good of a communicator you are, how much you want to reach out to others. If you have isolated individuals, it's going to be difficult for them. I mean, if you're not a self-starter, if you don't actively reach out to your classmates when you're supposed to, if you don't reach out to your professors when you need help, things are going to be more difficult than in a face-to-face environment, which is, in a way, you can't really compete with a face-to-face environment. Face-to-face is always going to be better because you can ask questions as they come to mind. You don't have to wait till you get off work. Maybe you're not home till 10 o'clock at night, and then you've got an assignment that you've got to get done, and you don't have any other time of day to do it. I mean, sometimes I deal with that. I mean, this is real life. This Liberty allows me to have a full-time job and to also go to school full-time. So in a sense, they have succeeded, but in other areas, they can't compete with face-to-face. But that's not really what this is meant for. This is meant to reach the people who can't do the face-to-face environment. So Liberty, to me, has succeeded in socialization and done a really good job at it. To restate it more plainly, job embeddedness at Liberty is high, with a high degree of fit between newcomers and their place as students at the university. At least this is how I felt. How can an organization reduce or prevent work-family conflict? This really depends on the size of the organization. So let's just consider that this organization is a larger one, so they have more money, and we'll go from there. Well, first of all, organizations have to view employees as individuals and that every person has their own life apart from the company. They don't want to think about the company when they're at home. Sometimes they do, create stress. When they're at work, they're thinking about problems that they have at home. And this has to be something that companies think about. If they don't, I mean, this could create some tough situations. You're going to have higher employee turnover, and this is going to eat into training costs and so on. Really, what companies have to do to deal with this is they have to implement work-family policies. Obviously, if they can afford it. This, more flexible hours if they can do it. If you can do your work at a different time, if you have to go pick up your kids, then companies need to be able to allow this. This allows the stress to go down and makes it so where they're more happy at work. Happy people at work generally do a better job. Um, and this doesn't have to just deal with flexible hours. It could be um, about health, about having gym memberships, just anything to improve a person's um, emotions. The problems in life. If they have their employer on their side, they're more likely to make better decisions with the company. And this isn't going to take away, bad employees. They're always going to be there. It's just going to make your workforce overall do better. And that's really what people need to focus on, is just how to overall get your workforce to do better. And stop trying to be perfect, because you can't. And all you're going to do is just make things harder. If you're just focused on trying to reduce employee theft and trying to increase production, you're not going to get anywhere. Um, you have to focus on your employees. You have to show you care, or at least act like you care, and that's the only way to make situations better. Uh, offering child care, even counseling services. If you're a counseling agency, maybe this is something you should have already been looking into. There's just so many ways to deal with this. And let's just say you're a smaller company and you don't have the money, or your work environment is in such a way that you can allow flexible hours. At least acknowledge that your employees are individuals, and sometimes they just need to know that that the employer has got their back, that their employer cares. Just simple things like that. Showing that you care about others is going to make it a big improvement. If I'm an employee at a company and I'm just a number to them and I'm only about how much profits I bring in, or how I affect their losses, the way I look at that company is going to be different. I'm not going to care as much. I'm not going to go that extra mile. Maybe, if I, weren't a Christian, I'd be looking at what can I get from the company that they're not giving me. Employee theft, all of this. So people have to look at this. You want to motivate your employees. So just simply by saying that you care and doing stuff for them when you can, that helps you out. So that's the simplest way that any organization can deal with the work-family conflict. Imagine you have been asked to develop a performance assessment program for employee development. What techniques could you use to adequately evaluate employee performance as comprehensively as possible? Think of Murphy's List. Obviously, Murphy's List is the one you could use. It has 4 performance dimensions that are evaluated, split up in in-role and extra role. And the in-role department is task-oriented behaviors. This is performing major tasks associated with the job. And then the extra role is interpersonally oriented behaviors, and downtime behaviors, and destructive and hazardous behaviors. But I want to talk about the other one that's talked about the text, which is Campbell's model of job performance. It's a little bit more in depth than Murphy's list, because it's not as not as streamlined, not as compact. So I feel like if you're on a more in-depth level of being able to properly assess your employees, this is the one you would go with. In it, it's still split up in the enroll and extra role. Enroll and extra role. In the enroll, it's job-specific task proficiency. This is a technical aspect of the job performance. Just like in Murphy's List, this is the same thing. Can the person do the technical aspects of their job properly? And number 2, it's non-job specific task proficiency. This is a common task performed by different employees. It's just everyday stuff that each employee ought to be able to do. All right. Now we're moving into the extra role part of this program. It says written and oral communication. This is very important, and it's probably going to be on most different models. It's can the employee properly communicate with others? And so that's a big deal. Demonstrating effort. I mean, that demonstrating effort is something that a organization would want to be able to rate, because this shows whether the employee is able to go the extra mile, and we just talked about in the text. Are they willing to put in that extra effort for the company? That's kind of important. Companies want a person who is willing to do that, so high score on that's going to be important. Maintaining personal discipline. This is refraining from negative habits, procrastinating, maybe bad-mouthing others at work. You want to refrain from doing this. So good scores in this department of refraining from doing that. It's going to reflect very well on that employee. Facilitating peer and team performance. Being a good team player. I mean, is this person capable of working with others at a high level of efficiency? Not being a lone wolf and just wanting to go sit in an office by themselves, or go out in the field by themselves and do all the work alone. You want someone who's willing to go out and wants to work with other people. That's what companies are looking for. Supervision and leadership. Is a person, how capable are they of supervising others and leading them? And management and administration, effectively organizing and keeping track of critical information. This is important, especially in leadership positions. Can someone, juggle a lot of important information in their head and not rely on notes or other documents that they have? I mean, they need to be able to come up with stuff off the top of their head. How well are they at doing that? And then that's what I would use if I was in an organization and I was in charge of coming up with an assessment program. I mean, I would use one of these lists, the Murphy's list or Campbell's model of job performance. I think Campbell's model of job performance probably does a better job of having different variation. And you can go a little bit more in depth. Yeah, it's bigger, so it might be more difficult to use maybe, but I kind of like it a little bit better. I mean, there's other models that can be used, but this is definitely one that I would institute if I were in an organization in charge of this. What are some possible common organizational constraints? How do they lead to counterproductive behaviors? The text actually lists 11, I think. Job-related information is one of them. Budgetary support, required support, time and materials, required services and help from others, task preparation, time availability, the work environment, scheduling of activities, transportation, and job-related authority. If we start out with job-related information, someone may not have the proper information for the job to get the job done. I mean, that can definitely lead to counterproductive behaviors. I mean, if we go through it, unnecessary rules and procedures, this could cause a lot of waste of time. This is something that I've dealt with quite a bit. There's just some things that really don't need to be done, but they're part of the procedure. If you don't do it, you can get in trouble, and it's a fine line to walk. lack of resources. If the company can't or won't provide the resources that are needed to get certain tests done, well, that's going to affect the quality of the work. Some things just won't get done properly or at all. Interruptions from fellow employees, this causes some certain constraints. I mean, when you're in the middle of trying to do something, like let's just say I'm making this video, and if my daughter comes in here and interrupts me, I'm gonna have to start all over again. She hasn't done that, you know. But if she had, I would just stop the recording and do it all over again. And this is what could happen in a workplace environment. Let's just say someone's in the middle of trying to do a recording, do a report, and they have this frame of mind, and then someone comes and interrupts them. Then they lost track of what they were talking about. Maybe they've got to redo their video. Maybe they interrupted some sort of meeting. It can be anything, but causes time loss. An important one from these is employee theft. Organizational constraints, especially if a lot of them deal with budgetary issues, it could cause a lot of employee fatigue, and then this could cause employees to just start stealing. I mean, they could have low enthusiasm for the company. They stopped caring, and they feel like the company doesn't care about them, so they're just gonna take what they feel is theirs. Another one is just being rude or hateful to others. If we look at the list of 11 different classifications that are part of the organizational constraints, some of those can lead to employees just being rude and hateful to others. They don't have a reason to be nice to other people. They don't control themselves. They feel like they're in an environment where they're not cared about, and one way for them to release their anger is to just be rude and hateful to other employees. Granted, you know, people could be like this before they even enter the company, but this could make these effects more amplified. So that's I've dealt with these in a professional manner. I've had employees be rude to me, or fellow co-workers. As an intern, I've seen the employees of a counseling center waste time purposely going to do her own personal errands when she was on the job. So when employees don't feel like the company has their back, or they feel like the company is restraining them too much, they just stop caring, and this can happen. So this is another reason why companies kind of need to be looking at the organizational constraints that are within their organization. You want to prevent these things.